Hello and welcome everybody to Unlocking Retail Loyalty. AI plus Auto QA fuels sales and boosts satisfaction. We'll go ahead and start with some introductions for this webinar and kick things off. Who we have here is Melissa Pollock from AmplifAI, has a very deep understanding of our retail customers and will be able to share her insights for all types of companies. And then Jordan from CMP Research. I'll let each of you do a quick introduction and we'll kick things off. Melissa, do you want to start?
Sure. Thanks, Scott. Great to be here. Great to see everyone. Melissa Pollock, VP Client Success at AmplifAI. And my team helps onboard retail clients on our awesome Amplify platform.
Fantastic. Jordan.
Yeah, hi everyone. Excited to be here as well. My name is Jordan Zivoder. I am the quantitative research lead and analyst for CMP Research. So, CMP Research is the research and advisory arm of customer management practice who puts on the Customer Contact Week events. So, in my role, typically, I am synthesizing data from all different sources, whether that be from executives in customer contact to frontline agents to supervisors, really understanding what are those top challenges that customer contact is facing today and going into the future. Really looking forward to our conversation today.
Fantastic. Really quick plug. Amplify is the performance management, coaching, auto QA, AI engine behind getting your agents to perform better, aligning performance to your key KPIs, and being able to use AI to connect all that data to specific coaching plans across different industries, different verticals at the mid-market and mega enterprise level. As you can see here, we've been mentioned by Gartner, by CMP Research reports, all the things that everyone talks about, but we're there too, and happy to have everyone here joining us. So let's get right into the panel discussion. So we'll start things off with why is customer experience so important in retail in general? Melissa, we'll start off with you.
Way to start with a big one. That's a great
Yeah.
question. I believe that the retail experience is so complicated in a way because it's not just the simple upfront product sale. And that's what we all think about, right? Retail is some kind of product, but it's the whole post-sale service and support journey that basically impacts that customer experience. How easy it is to get support, to get accurate information, or how difficult it is. How often we might get transferred or have to escalate to get what we're needing. So basically, did I get what I need? Did I get a resolution? And that has, I'd say, even a much larger impact on a consumer's sentiment with a brand than just the original purchase experience. And that's key because the customer experience leads to retention of those customers for the brand. And obviously, if you retain your customers, you are enhancing your brand loyalty. And as you enhance brand loyalty and have repeat customers, you are enhancing the number one factor, which is lifetime customer value.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. Obviously, the retail industry is super competitive. There's just a vast amount of substitutes
Mhm.
that consumers can choose from when it
Mhm.
comes to retail. And really, and I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail, if one company disappoints anywhere in that journey, it is really easy for a customer to leave and go to another competitor. Every touch point is really important. And what I'll talk about a little bit later of those service failures, can companies really capitalize
Mm.
on those? Because again, if you don't, there's a high chance you're losing customer loyalty in that experience.
Yeah. And with so many brands out there that don't even need a brick and mortar anymore because online
Mhm.
sales and purchasing through social media, all those things are so easy to do versus years past, that the loyalty component very much is hinging on that experience versus the quality, as you both mentioned, because there's so many brands out there that have
Mhm.
such good offerings. And some examples of this, now obviously these have brick and mortar, but are basically setting the bar for best-in-class service. Obviously, Nordstrom has been there for a very long time, where they don't even hand you the bag across the counter. They come around the counter and hand it to you. Costco's return policy is one of the best in the business. And the Apple Store, it's not that you're buying an Apple product. The entire store is a massive customer service center, essentially, right? They have all the tables and all the geniuses, and you set an appointment not to buy something, but to get that care for you to be set up for your product. The entire business model of their store is based on customer service. If you didn't already know now, but you probably did if you're joining and watching this. And this has been something that's been talked about for a very long time on if you have no issues with a product or a company and you don't have to interact with the customer service center, you're going to have a lower lifetime value to the company than if you had a service issue, it was recovered properly, you're going to buy from them even more, and that all compounds together. Do you still see this being true, Melissa?
I'd say absolutely. I think the industry is spot on and those trends are still spot on. That's exactly what I was talking about earlier. It's not just the original interaction, the original sale experience, it's the service and support thereafter, which, depending on the product, could be a one-off or could be a lifetime journey. So, most definitely, if that piece is not fantastic and fabulous, then it definitely impacts the brand loyalty and therefore the customer value.
Yeah, I love this chart because we know when there is a service failure, it is the frontline agents that are the first line of defense, and they are in the position to de-escalate that situation and begin that process of rebuilding trust. So again, it is really important for them to have that visibility of all the interactions that are happening because, again, how many times is this happening with your frontline agents and you just
Mm,
don't know that there's a service failure? By understanding all those interactions and what your great agents are doing, what are the things that they're saying to recover that service failure is super important. The more that you can see, the more times that, again, a service failure, it's going to happen. We know that. But the good companies are the ones that can rebound the more times than none. And understanding what are our agents doing that are really allowing them to get back up and recover from that negative experience.
Absolutely. And the more you're in tune with that, the better off you're going to be. There was even an athletic clothing brand that I use, and I bought a water bottle from them. The water bottle fell off the roof of my car when I was getting stuff out for my boys' football game. I went to the website, chatted them, and within 5 minutes of chatting them while I'm watching the kids warm up, I already had a gift card for the amount of the what the water bottle costs, and they were apologetic, and it was done and done. I was like, oh, that was simple. I immediately have still, not immediately, but I still have continued to use that brand moving forward because of that. If that was a bad experience, it definitely would have changed my mind. So,
mm.
what specific impacts can CX make in retail KPIs, not just these anecdotal stories? Unless you want to kick us off?
Sure. So, Scott, I think there's an interesting question to that. Traditionally, we've been looking at things like a net promoter score, right? Or a likelihood to shop again. Would you refer someone, to the same business? We've always, obviously, always looked at traditional CSAT or survey scores, if you will. So the experience obviously directly impacts all of that. But I think what's been most fun and fascinating is that with the AI QA or auto QA capabilities now, we can also derive all other kinds of metric KPIs for retail. So when you think about what drives experience and loyalty, are you capturing all the opportunities, right? Are you capturing all the revenue opportunities? Are you capturing all the service and resolution opportunities? There's new ways now with this technology to find the improvements and the efficiencies that we need to make. Previously, there was no way to identify these, not at scale. And so now we can get this amazing detailed insight into things like sales skills, right? If you think about how do I create urgency in our conversation, or How do I demonstrate caring and interest? How do I handle objections? Do I use assumptive language? So this sales collection, but also the service collection of behaviors. These things can actually be measurable KPIs now by using AI scoring at scale across all interactions, as opposed to just manual on a few subsets of them. And it goes beyond just the traditional sort of procedural and compliance-driven evaluation of an interaction into this broader scope of we can look for resolution, we can look for empathy, we can look for these sales skills and behaviors, and we can actually connect them to new KPIs in the dashboards and the trends. It's this, again, evolution from what was the old sort of constraint into dozens of things that we can create questions for the AI to score and bring insight instantly at scale across all agents, across all interactions. So it's really extremely exciting what's possible now. Everyone's always talked about insights helping for customer experience, but this is in pouring gas on the fire as it relates to how we used to be able to glean insights.
Yeah, I'll add to that just because in my background, typically I've conducted many different types of voice of the customer products to understand
Mhm.
what is truly driving customer satisfaction. And to gather that data, it takes a lot of time to gather the surveys, or maybe you're doing qualitative interviews to
Mhm.
inform how you're building out that survey to really get what are the key drivers of customer satisfaction. But we know today that it is very difficult to get a decent amount of customers to complete a survey that is over 5 minutes long. And any kind of customer experience driver survey, those you're getting large battery of questions. These are pretty long surveys, and it's just not as easy as it once was. So now, like you said, pouring gas on the fire,
Mhm.
every interaction to the customer contact function, whether that be a phone call, a chat, an email, that's all a data point. And you're getting thousands, if not tens of thousands of these interactions to really understand what is truly driving customer satisfaction or NPS. Because again, we'll talk about this a little bit later. These QA scores, they have a lot of bloat to it. There's a lot of fluff things that have been added over the
Mhm.
years. And really what anyone really wants to know, what are the metrics that we need to really follow that have the biggest impact on improving NPS or customer satisfaction. Today, we're in a great place where automating all these interactions is much easier. You don't need a team of data scientists to go through all that unstructured data. Now you can have that fully automated to get those rich insights.
Yeah.
I love that too. I got to jump in on that, Scott, because Jordan, you make such a good point. And like traditional QA just didn't correlate to satisfaction and didn't correlate to sales increase or sales impact. Again, because the typical focus was much more compliance, procedural, SOPs, internal requirements, and was less about behaviors and opportunities, which makes sense. Again, when you think about traditionally, we're capturing in our human labor less than two. I know that's the statistic, less than 2%. I usually see in my clients less than 1% of the overall interactions being assessed. So part of it wasn't just, oh, that's how it used to be. It was much more procedural. It's also because you weren't getting enough of a sample set to have any idea what the real trends were with your customers.
And speaking to obviously understanding what actually drives customer satisfaction or any of these other KPIs, question for you, Melissa. Do you think the QA scores are gone to the wayside? Do you think they're going to evolve? I'm curious your opinion on that.
Jordan wants a debate. That's what I hear.
Yeah.
That's a very savory topic and
Mhm.
also a well debated topic. We want category and question level scoring of behaviors and skills, but we still see folks wanting an overall aggregate score too. Look, there's so much traditional operational mentality in all our environments to understand the output score, or the output result. The flip really for me is we don't just have that. I've got multiple clients that are setting up not just one QA score as a result of the AI scoring output, but often five because, or six. I've got one who's got six too, because each category can become its own KPI. So at a sales skill level, we're looking at how many opportunities was there an opportunity? I'm thinking of the question, how we wrote it. Was there an opportunity on this interaction? Yes. Okay, great. Did we close that opportunity? Yes. Okay, great. Now my metric output that I'm going to display in the dashboard is conversion percent, but I'm identifying the opportunities and the close rate on our side with AI as opposed to it being some data source on the client side, which has always been the typical. But again, that then rests more on theory than on insight at scale. So, long story short, I know I'm deviating, but it's such a good topic. I don't think the overall is going to go away, Jordan. The business still wants to see the overall output. But the breakdown of that now into individual KPIs at more of the category and even the question level around sales behaviors and service skills is again goes back to that. There's so many incredible capabilities in what's possible now. It's pretty exciting. So I think it changes the debate.
Yeah.
No rebuttal on my end.
I think the other thing is how you measure them as well. Like just taking average handle time, that's something that everyone wants to reduce for all the reasons you normally want to reduce it. But now with such advanced ability to change how you're evaluating and evaluate so many more interactions, there's a toy brand that's very well known globally that we're working with now that they actually want to measure, is the customer having fun on the call and are they joining the
Mhm.
loyalty program? Making sure they have fun might include having a longer call. So for them, the average handle time isn't as important as these other business metrics that they know drives continued purchases. And so adjusting that and having the ability to measure things in a more advanced way is super important to them. And so with all these advancements in AI and how you can measure things and the granularity you can get now, I buried the lead a little bit by clicking into this slide too early. But Jordan, it seems like the ability to upskill frontline agents, even upskill the leaders, and improving the analytics that and insights that you can get are becoming more and more important or just staying as a top priority. I would even argue to say number 14 maybe should be higher because upgrading your QA will feed all those other things. But if you could talk to some of the research you have here from CMP.
Yeah, definitely. And this research we conducted every year, basically, typically in Q4 of every year. So actually, right now, we're in the process of fielding for 2026, 2027 priorities. So it'll be interesting to see how things change. But the idea of this slide is understand from the executive perspective. So those that are responsible for the decision making for customer contact or CX, we ask them how important are each of these 19 initiatives to their 2025, 2026 strategy? And then how difficult is it to implement these initiatives? So that's on the y-axis. So initiatives that are up higher are typically more difficult, and initiatives that are farther to the right are more important. So we like to focus our research on that top right quadrant because those are most important and most difficult to initiate. Again, I'll just start real quick. Just number 5, reducing costs. This was the number 6 priority a year ago. And even 2 years ago, it was the number 9 priority. So again, executives are under more cost pressure, and that is why we're seeing a lot of the priorities focused to technology. So again, I'll get to the top 3, but things like number 2, increasing customer adoption of self-service. Number 4, integrating generative AI technologies. This is really tech focused. And a couple of years ago, we used to see things like improving agent engagement or reducing burnout. Those were top priorities. Those are not to say they're not important, but what's coming top of mind to executives is technology. And as Scott mentioned, improving customer analytics and insights, super important. As I spoke to this earlier, every conversation, every email, every chat, that is a data point. And there is so much insights to leverage from all those data points. And most customer contact functions aren't really analyzing or understanding or gaining insights from those interactions. And today it's easier than ever. There's technology out there that automates all that hard work. Again, cleaning all that unstructured data and understanding what are the top intents, sentiment, predictive, CSAT, all these great metrics. But what that also means is, again, with automation, again, increasing adoption of self-service, what's left for the frontline agent are more challenging cases. They're not just doing password resets every time. They're getting more of those frustrated customers because self-service did handle a lot of that, what I'll call low-hanging fruit type of interactions. And now, number 6, upskilling frontline agents is becoming more and more important. You can see that it's up 4 spots from a year ago. Yes, upgrading QA is number 14. That can mean updating questions or things like that, but at the heart of it is number 6 is upscaling the frontline agents. And that is most important because, again, their job is more difficult than what it was years ago. And they're handling, again, more complex situations and even more frustrated customers. Yeah, so that's a lot of what we're seeing. Really stay tuned for our release in a couple months when we see these priorities shift by next year.
Yeah. In my CCAS days, marketing for those types of companies, one of the benefits to that a customer said to their agents is, hey, we're not bringing in AI agents because we want to replace you. We want to get all of the work that you don't like about your job, those
Yeah.
transactional things you're doing every day, out of your job so that you can be the expert to the rescue for more of these complex items. But in doing so, like you said, you need to have better upskilling of the frontline agents, which means you need to have more data about those interactions and you need to have more tailored coaching for those agents to make sure that they're appropriately handling them because you have to upskill everybody on the front lines because it's not just your best agents who are getting these complex ones, everyone's getting them, which kind of goes to this evolution of QA where we already talked about how 1% maybe isn't even possible at some companies or they're not doing that. We then had data overload with just auto QA. We didn't have the power or the coverage of people to analyze this or analyze it properly. Adding AI to that, which is where we're at today, is great because now you get to see that holistic view. And then the next step for us and on the Amplify side is using that data in a very seamless way to tailor the coaching to get your skill levels up because you need to get ahead of that trend where if you do implement more self-service, you already have this better coaching mechanism in place beforehand. So we'll jump ahead to the next one. This evolution is why, per CMP, 65% of executives saying upgrading QA is important to their functional strategy in the next 2 years. Any extra context you want to add to this, Jordan?
Yeah, I mean, we are hearing quite a bit. There is a lot of future investment going into, again, whether it's upgrading the QA to trying to even go a hybrid approach of automating maybe some of the standard behaviors. Maybe there's still a little bit of that human intervention, of course, but it's becoming more and more interest because, again, back to the executive priorities, that ability to upskill agents, understanding not only an aggregate of, okay, of all my agents, maybe there's a lack of empathy. We need to do some coaching overall for the entire group, but specifically for each individual, having those unique individual development plans to help that agent really be the best agent that they can be is really important. And for a traditional QA supervisor, if they're analyzing maybe 1% of the calls, a lot of that time is just focused on listening and finding those insights. Whereas anybody that's utilizing an auto QA tool, now their role shifts to actually being able to coach and really upskill all those agents on an individual and personalized level.
Absolutely.
Two different pieces I think that we can highlight that might be interesting for folks too. Different products, different sales procedures, right? So sometimes we might make an appointment first and attempt to then convert to a sale. So you could have an appointment set metric and then an actual sales metric. Or you might have a discussion which turns into a rental of something. And then later, another conversation where you're trying to convert to a sale. This kind of touches on the story I was telling earlier about trying to identify, was there an opportunity on the call, whether it was setting an appointment or scheduling a rental or actually closing a deal. And then sometimes we're just giving a quote and then later attempting to close that quote. There's all different kinds of sales behaviors depending on the retail logo and what the business is and what they're trying to do. But they tend to follow that scope of I'm booking an appointment or I'm giving a quote and then I'm trying to close something. And the very fascinating thing on those behaviors is we can get into, I'd say, ranges of evaluation with the AI. And I'm going to give a service example here because most retail consider, hey, you sold the product, and we're going to focus for a minute in this story on the post-sale support and service that we said earlier was so key to the ongoing brand loyalty, right? So in those service behaviors, a couple of really key ones that are great examples I can use here: rapport and empathy, right? Rapport is a little tricky because you may or may not have a lot of opportunity for it if someone is elevated, let's say. You have to get right to it and focus more on the empathy. But even both of them can be looked at from the AI scoring perspective at a basic skill level or a more robust skill level. And so I've gone through this with several clients where they've defined how they want to score whether someone showed empathy or not. And we might have started out defining that in the more traditional sense of putting yourself in someone else's shoes, saying you understand how that feels, some of the sort of textbook definition components of empathy. But when you listen to interactions or read transcripts, you start to see that a lot of basic level empathy skill is more just, I'm sorry that happened, and then going about getting to taking care of the issue. And so I've literally got two different clients in the process of, I'll say, easing back a little bit on what they're willing to accept, understanding the hook to what you were saying just a little bit ago, Scott, that it's one thing to identify where our opportunities are at scale across all our agents. It's quite another then to go coach and develop that.
Mhm.
And so the two things have to happen in tandem in order to actually impact performance. That sounds simple, and it is, but in there you've got AI scoring at scale, and then you've got leaders coaching to the very precise behaviors that each individual person needs help with. And it'll take some time. It might take a few months, it might take longer than that to get away from accepting, I'm sorry that happened, let me get your order number and look that up, to get back to, wow, that's really rotten. That's an unfortunate experience you had. I can appreciate you'd be upset about that. Let's see how we can make it better. It's just two different levels of skill. And I have enjoyed understanding that we can ratchet up or down, if you will, the level of instruction and training for the AI in what it accepts as, yes, they showed empathy. And similarly for rapport, there's a much more sort of comprehensive rapport definition. There's also a very basic one where maybe I just ask you how you're doing today. And different things are going to be acceptable for different brands. You showed some high-end key brands that are well mature in their processes earlier, and it's quite likely those would want to start with the full definitions and expectations, having that skill level probably well developed within their agent population. Others maybe not there. So I say all of that just to say, I think a lot of prospective clients looking at this have a little bit of fear around, what am I going to see? I've been doing a couple hundred a month. Now I'm going to be doing thousands a month. What am I going to see? And then am I going to suddenly make all my scores bad? You don't have to. There's a whole training process, a whole variance analysis against your humans, and ultimately, even this ability to consider your contemporary culture and where you are at a skill level with different work groups or sites or channels and adjust the AI training and instruction based on that. long story, but it's been a really fantastic experience and learning, I'd say, for a lot of clients.
Yeah. And with that, adapting to those different scenarios in more detail with the advent of AI, the juxtaposition can still happen where your QA scores are better, but the CSAT and NPS scores don't match that level. Jordan,
Mm,
can you go into that paradox a little bit?
Yeah, and it's what I brought up earlier. That idea is that we've talked to executives, and the biggest problem is that their QA score might have been created almost 2 decades ago. And with new leadership change, there's new questions that are adding to that
mhm,
QA score. And over time, this QA score just gets so bloated. There's just a lot of things in there that everybody wants to know about, but that don't really directly correlate to customer satisfaction. So again, you can see all this like really great score, but a negative CSAT for whatever reason. And there's just
mm,
this misunderstanding again of what do I really need to put into my QA score? Like, how do I
mhm,
cut back on the things that are most important? Because over time, this QA score that we've developed has just it's grown larger and larger, and I need guidance to help me cut it down and really just what are things that I need to be looking for. And
mm,
again, this is where looking at every interaction, understanding what are the true drivers of whether it's customer satisfaction, maybe it's NPS, whatever that a KPI might be, so that you can actually coach to those behaviors that really matter, not coaching to did you greet the customer by their first name? We know, obviously, of course, important table stake, but going deeper than that, what are the actual behaviors? Yes, empathy, but what do we truly mean by empathy? Every
mm,
company might be a little bit different in what those
mhm.
drivers are, and that's the what's most important, really, to really getting that QA score, cutting down the fat, I should say.
Yeah.
That's another really good point too, Jordan, because you can do that with the AI as well. We talked earlier about training, and so you can modify the training culturally, work group, and as you said, from traditional QA to the more specific behaviors. So it's been a fun exercise.
Yeah. And just to plug again, you need to make sure that your software is able to have different types of intake forms and be able to structure those intake
Mm,
forms of that QA interactions in a way that aligns first to your NPS and CSAT scores, adjust
mhm,
scoring so that your QA scores can match the results based on maturing your process, as Jordan just mentioned, and being able to have this new streamlined flow where you're taking different teams and different interaction types and bringing them in a way that actually does align your scores with your coaching to affect your end results in the proper way.
From the clients you work with, do you typically see someone that's willing to maybe even rip out their entire QA score or slowly maybe modify and cut back? Or I'm curious what that looks like from your perspective.
It's a really good question, Jordan. I don't see anyone taking out again, the overall kind of QA score, but we are certainly collaboratively changing from one all-in QA score to an overall QA score, but a QA score for empathy, a QA score
Mhm.
for rapport, for listening, a QA score for sales opportunities, objection handling, whatever the key behavioral desires are of a particular brand, we're helping rewrite the questions. I think this is a big part of to your
Mhm.
question. The reason that we can get beyond just one overarching QA score into thematically specific behavioral based QA scores is because we are changing the forms, right? Clients come in with the existing QA forms, and I was talking with two different customers last week doing this exact same activity where we're analyzing the existing QA form. We're looking at some have scripts, some don't, but everyone usually has a flow, or even if not that, training on how to do the call or how to do the chat, right? So when we look at that material, are the expectations that are written into those interaction training scenarios, are they resembled by the questions that are in the QA forms? And in many cases, yes, but in certain cases, no. And so we're helping write questions that will assess and evaluate the certain things that they want to know about. One of them in particular wanted to know the caller sentiment and didn't have another way to get to true sentiment. So we wrote in a question to assess the sentiment. We can do that with finite things too, like resolution or transfers, but some of the more behavioral items are really the interesting ones to write in questions for. And again, those questions are not only can not only be part of a score inside of a form, but can also be a scored KPI out in a dashboard that gives business level trends and insights and drives action. So the whole thing is full circle, but they're still not ripping out the overall, but absolutely we are changing the game. We're changing what are we looking and assessing for, and then where we're positioning that. So there's still business level insight, but now we're coaching to those input behaviors instead of just an output metric.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we've touched on this already, but visually seeing it, where there's an interaction on this is a mock interaction where retail customers asking for a product return. In the original QA, there could be a lack of empathy and you
Mm.
didn't have the right insight to score that properly or to see the long-term effects of it or to see what happens in terms of how are we getting that agent to the next level. When you have a solution like Amplify where you're able to tailor that scoring for the interaction a lot more in a more advanced way, you can then have the platform tee up the right coaching task for the empathy, which then now you pull in all this other information that AI can
Mm.
connect the dots for you on automatically, where you're seeing not just the sentiment change, but you're seeing and the average handle time, you're seeing that there's additional purchases followed. You can see
Mm.
what terms and what things that people are saying that are keying in these improved metrics overall. And when you've tailored your requirements in a certain way, then you can advance that a lot more effectively.
Scott, if you think back on kind of the original conversations we were having about that too, retail, you're bringing in revenue with the original sale, and then you're having the service and support afterwards. But retail
Hmm.
also loses money after the fact
Yeah.
through, they usually call them concessions or discounts, giveaways, some mechanism like you were talking about a minute ago to try and help balance out that we didn't make you happy. Something was wrong, and a lot of times it's a broken product or missing parts or again, in sort of the commoditized product retail environments. Other times it's just that service experience. But what we typically see for retail in particular is that that lack of empathy, that lack of resolution, that lack of getting to a positive sentiment, that poor survey score, then all of that is driving increased concessions, increased discounts. And so I, the bottom line in it is that where we see these skill gaps in our agents in empathy and resolution and so forth is costing money. It's lost revenue for retail everywhere.
Yes. Yeah. Goes back to the point that I added in from our brainstorm of this session is agents missing skill gaps or gaps in
Mm.
their skill equals lost revenue. The contact centers often get dubbed the term cost centers. This is a large part of that reason. And this is a way to combat
That's
that
fact.
in
Yeah.
in a more advanced way that's now possible that wasn't possible before. It was
Hmm.
because it was just part of doing business. Now we can address any of these customer interactions and create a positive result out of them. And this new software and AI that's available is able to facilitate that for you and get you to the place that you need to be. So the long-term improvement of your customer experience and connecting to it, we've spoken to this in pretty great detail. So if there's anything else that you'd like to say to it, otherwise we can skip ahead to the where do you start since we only have a few minutes left.
Yeah, I'll just say one sentence on this one. It basically, again, if we can connect the AI insights to KPIs into dashboards and views and drive action from it, then we can coach instead of results like too many giveaways or too low of
Mm,
sales. We can actually coach the behaviors that we see that this agent or that agent is struggling with. That I think is the primary value in having all the insight at an individual level. At a business level, of course, you're able to make more decisions when you understand the reality.
absolutely.
I'll just add one more note to that last bullet there, building high performing teams. We know that from our research with frontline agents that career development is actually the number three driver of retaining talent. So
Yeah.
obviously developing your talent is great, but also being able to retain them is even more important because obviously you have to bring in someone new, train them, get them up to that same level that lost agent was at. Not only is developing them is very important to them for them to build their skills and to grow in their career.
It's a good
Retention
point,
of,
Jordan.
yeah, great point. Retention of great agents is has always been a concern, and you always want to keep your best people no matter who you are or what you do in your job. And getting better in your job and being at a company that's making you better at your job is definitely something that you can take a lot of pride in that you
Mhm.
really don't get everywhere. So that's a great point to bring up. Thank you. So where do you start with all this? And we've had many webinars over the course of the year. I even had a panel discussion with our CEO and several other CEOs of other research firms, partners, resale partners, and every single time, no matter how we address it, the question's answered by start with a specific problem. Don't start with just adding the technology. Find out what it is that you're trying to fix and start there with a specific team, with a specific problem where the outcome can provide great value to you, whatever your business type is. And here are just some examples where you can start and some common metrics that you can adapt to. And I think that this is something that is overlooked as someone who's implemented technology before myself, but for marketing, obviously. And a lot of times
Mhm.
folks come in and they just try and implement everything that is available in the platform, and then they think, or we think along the way, we can refine it and it's just going to fix everything because we have this new software. But really, it's about addressing a specific problem. Obviously, you're in the thick of it with customers here, Melissa, and maybe some words of advice for everyone out there listening.
I think you have a terrific point, Scott. It's understanding strategically what are you trying to do, right? It's usually one of the first questions we ask when we meet new clients that have been brought to us by our team. And okay, we're going to onboard these folks. It's what do you do? And what do you want to do? Where do you want to go from there? And strategy has changed a lot for retail companies, and then again, not changed at all. Because the fundamental things that they're trying to achieve are the same, but the paths to get there are very different. And to your point, there's a lot of technology, there's a lot of systems to the extent that we can isolate a particular strategy that performance management AI can support. And then we synthesize the two together in a way that I think is extremely unique. We often are able to help solve a lot of problems at once. But I think you hit the nail on the head ultimately. It's what's the strategy? Because strategy always has to align to any investment, any training, any development. Everything that is put on the floor is going to connect back up to a top level strategy. So it's always what we want to know and ask too. And we typically, to your point, also start with a certain team and in the AI context, even usually a certain form. Understand the work, understand the culture, understand what we're trying to improve, help adapt and update the evaluation form itself so that it can capture the data that'll give us those insights. Yeah.
Anything that you're seeing to add to that, Jordan, from CMP standpoint?
No, that's pretty thorough, I would say.
Great. One thing that came up while we were talking about this too is you already have a foundation to start from because it all starts with the data. So it's not like there's this huge mountain to
Mm.
climb, maybe in consolidating it in the proper way for the AI to analyze it properly. That's where our expertise comes in. But you start there, and then the challenge, and then the nuance, refining of it, of how AI can adapt to it. And I think that having actual operators in the seat of whoever's helping you go through this is super important. And as you can see, Melissa has a lot of expertise. A lot of our, along with her, CS leaders have been operators for many years and can help along with this. What are some of the things that people can think about, Melissa, as they start to look at what data do they need? And
Mm.
are there any blockers in starting something like this? Or is it more so, it doesn't matter where you're at, we're going to help you get through this?
I'd say there's a lot of that because folks are in different places, but usually everyone has interactions somewhere in some system. And there's obviously lots of systems that have call recordings and transcripts. And that's really the number one item that's needed is access to the actual interactions, whether they're already transcribed or not. So the only real blocker, like I have one customer who has calls and they're migrating to a system that will also have transcription, so they don't want to double pay transcription now when they're getting that. That's the only blocker I've seen. Everyone we run into has the data, to your point. There are calls, there are transcriptions, and we can take either one. Every client has some form of existing QA form. We can take
Mhm.
that. And then, as you heard throughout, we don't want to just take that's got to be married with what's in your scripts, what's in your training of what you expect. And are those behaviors in here to be evaluated? Or if you're trying some of the others I mentioned earlier, trying to mine for opportunities and conversions, are we assessing for those things in the current versions? And usually not. These are things that are new to AI scoring, so where we're adding questions to assess various behaviors. But the ultimate construct is there. You have the calls, you have the interactions, you have some semblance of QA process and QA form and the culture, climate, and strategy of your own logo. And we want to learn and understand that, listen to calls, read the scripts, see the training, because the more we understand that, the more we can help you refine the form to collect the insights that are going to allow us to then drive action. And that action should give you the result that you want. So it's a full circle process that pretty simply just starts with some interactions.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that an important thing to think about with that first step of the data is maybe you have
Yeah.
a performance management platform, maybe your CCAS platform has a basic version of it, or maybe there's auto QA that is offered through something that you already have. My ask that I hear on customer calls and case studies all the time is the reason a lot of folks choose Amplify is because we're
Mm,
agnostic to all of those solutions. It doesn't matter how or where your data is stored, and there's no limitations on bringing in
mhm.
information from all these other sources so that you're not just subject to only the interactions that happen or the transcripts or surveys that happen within
Yeah.
your contact center platform. You have to be able to pull that all together into one data pool to be able to analyze it properly. And then can you adapt those QA forms to be able to intake the information properly? So I guess that's something that comes up quite often is are the tools you have able to bring in all the information that you need without having to piecemeal it together after the fact. And so I think that's something that you can look at there. And then, of course, as you move on down,
Mhm.
refining everything, are you working with people who have that operator expertise on that contact center leader experience to be able to guide you through it so that you're not just getting someone to help you make a dashboard work properly? They're actually helping you improve your business specifically. So I know that's a plug for Amplify, but make sure if you have a different vendor that they are able to provide you that level of technology and that level of expertise to get you through it. Okay, we'll end here on just Jordan. We'll give you a quick plug. If you
Yeah.
are looking at vendors, you do have some great research on auto QA and a bunch of other research on your website that people can go to. Could you direct them towards some places to go?
Yeah, for sure. So obviously this QR code will download the latest report for the automated QA QM category that we evaluated back in April. We actually will be refreshing this category in January, but yes, feel free to scan this QR code or go to cmpresearch.com/prism where you can see some of the other categories as well.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Melissa and Jordan, for sharing your expertise. And everyone, have a great day. Thank you again.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.